Yeah, well, I think the economy is in horrible shape. I think that's one of the reasons that President Biden is so unpopular, because I think a lot of the people who are struggling in this economy, in part, blame the president. He's not solely responsible, but he certainly hasn't done anything to help. Everything he's done is actually taken a bad situation and made it worse. But if you look objectively at the data, the savings rate is at the lowest it's been since 2007. I think it's down to 2.3%. So Americans have blown through all their stimulus money, and now they're pretty much broke. If you look at credit card debt, it's at an all-time record high. So Americans are struggling to put food on the table and to pay the electric bill, and so they're borrowing more money on their credit cards. If you look at what's happening to wages, they are declining in real terms. And I think the real decline is being masked by the fact that we are understating inflation. I think the actual inflation rate is about double what the government will admit to. And that means that the real decline in wages is much greater, which explains why so many people are now moonlighting. A record number of Americans have 2 and 3 jobs. In fact, you have more Americans than ever that are working 2 full-time jobs. Most people don't want multiple jobs. They would prefer to be able to support themselves and their family on one job. But unfortunately, in the Biden economy, that's not possible. And that's where all these jobs that are being created are going. They're going to people who don't want more jobs, but who are forced to take them anyway, because that's the only way that they can keep up with the rising cost of living.
That's amazing, because the jobs report has been touted, the November jobs report has been touted by the administration and even some of their critics as the sign of something good to come. The November report said the labor market looks strong. The economy added 263,000 jobs in November, well above the 200,000 job projection. And at the employment rate now, very flat at 3.7%. And that led the president to brag about how they're creating jobs. And you can hear him sounding very optimistic. Those numbers on paper, they do look good. But you're saying you have to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, they're being very disingenuous. And that's a nice way of putting it about these numbers, because the implication is that, 260,000 people who didn't have jobs, who were unemployed, now they've got jobs. That's not what happened. All of those jobs went to people who were already employed. They are part-time jobs. That's what's happening. And it's not a great economy where people who have jobs need to get a second job. They would rather have the leisure. They would rather be able to spend more time with their families. But unfortunately, they can't afford that. They have to go and get another job. And that is where these jobs are coming from. If people come out of retirement, let's say somebody was retired, they're 70 years old, they were looking forward to just playing golf and going to the beach and hanging out with their grandkids, but now they have to go take a job at Target because that's the only way to pay the grocery bill. Do you want to brag about creating an economy where unemployed people are forced to go back into the workforce?
Well, what about the unemployment rate, right? They're saying it's nice and low, 3.7%. This is, some employers complain about this because they say they can't find good workers. That suggests all the jobs are filled and, people are working to the extent they want to work.
Well, the main reason that the unemployment rate is so low is so many people who aren't working are not counted as being unemployed. We have over 100 million working age Americans who are no longer in the labor market. The labor force participation
rate. Isn't that by choice,
rate,
though? Isn't that now the current narrative is that those people, unlike in some past, low economic periods where they couldn't get jobs, people weren't, whatever. These are supposedly people who have decided, post-pandemic, they saw the light, they love the couch, they want to sit there, they could take a job, but they've just decided to be in their happy place when it comes to workload now.
Yeah, well, I'm sure for some people that may be the case. Maybe they have a better alternative. Maybe they can live off of welfare and housing vouchers and SNAP, benefits. Maybe they find that a better alternative than having to actually work for a living. But I'm sure a lot of the people there are just discouraged workers. You don't count. If you've basically given up looking for a job because you don't think there's a job out there that you're qualified for at a wage that makes sense for you to take the job. After a year, you don't count even in the U6 number, which is not the number that you just cited. If you look at the U6 number, which includes discouraged workers and people who are only working part-time but would prefer to work full-time and who are still looking for full-time employment but can't find it, there the unemployment rate, I think, is closer to 7%. But even that unemployment rate, once you've been discouraged for over a year, you're no longer counted in that number either. So I think if you objectively measured the unemployment rate and included all the people who are not working, but who would be working if they believe they can find a job, or who have settled for a part-time job when they prefer a full-time job, I'm sure the actual unemployment rate is in the double digits.
What about, you mentioned the savings, and the reports I read, CNBC claims that consumers have 1.5 trillion right now in excess savings from the pandemic stimulus programs, but that it's going to run out at some point soon. But if they've got 1.5 trillion still right now in excess savings, I mean, how does that compare to where we were? And it doesn't support what you said, which is that money ran out.
Yeah, the savings rate, again, is 2.3%. That's the most recent number that was released last week by the government. We haven't had savings that low since 2005. But one of the reasons that Americans weren't saving in 2005 is because they had so much home equity. They were just getting rich off the real estate. That was the peak of the real estate bubble. But right now, Americans are losing their home equity. Real estate prices are now falling. But what's more problematic is real wages are falling because the cost of living is going up and credit card debt has exploded. So if Americans really had all this savings, credit card debt wouldn't be skyrocketing. The reason credit card debt is going up so much is because people don't have savings. They can't afford to buy things. They have to borrow the money. But more of the money that they're borrowing is being spent on food. It's being spent on electricity, on gas. I mean, look at all the big retailers that are reporting that their customers are spending more money on food and less money on everything else because food is so expensive.
The credit card situation is scary. I have been in deep credit card debt back in my law school days when I had to put myself through school and support myself at the same time. And it's a sickening feeling to see those cards run up. And the people who run it up, yes, there are some who are just spendthrifts, but the vast majority of people, I think, who have enormous credit card debt are buying things they do need, and they'd rather not have it on credit, but they don't have the cash. And it's stomach turning to see the bills run up and to see the interest rates go up, and the interest rates go up and up and up. And I can only imagine it would make people feel kind of angry at the Fed for, every time they raise one of these rates, you owe more.
Yeah, you're looking at credit card rates now that are about 20%. And that is a huge amount of interest to pay. And, I think a lot of people today have a lot more consumer debt than just their credit card debt, because over the last few years, a lot of these buy now, pay later companies have come into existence. And so people are using those companies to buy stuff without money, but it doesn't show up in the credit card numbers because it's not credit card debt, but it's still debt that the consumer is obligated to repay. And I don't believe they're going to be able to do it.